Yeah, so welcome to the Startup Culture Community Networks panel. So this is Adam and I. We're both podcasters, so we've done this a couple of times before, but we're actually recent UC grads as well. So we were just chatting about this on the way here. It wasn't long ago that we were in the UC Business School, walking around, having way too many coffees, talking about business ideas. So it feels really nice to be back. It was actually here where our podcast first started. So we were really bored in an economics history lecture. It was like 3 hours long. So we were just, we wanted to find something to do. And we went out in the lecture and we said, hey, why don't we talk about our exchange experience? So we booked one of the rooms, I think it's around Fisher, and we just chatted about our exchange experience. And that was our first quasi podcast. And yeah, we've been doing it for a while now.
Yeah, it was a pretty grim lecture, but we're pretty happy that it happened because since then we feel like we've come quite a long way interviewing people like Malcolm Turnbull, heads of like the major sort of Australian VCs, entrepreneurs like Tim Fung of Airtasker. We've also started an angel investing syndicate to invest in startups, and now Sachin spends his full-time job investing in startups. So we might hound some of you after to try and invest in you if there's any good ideas out there. But sort of being on this journey for the past couple of years, we've been able to see the growth of the Australian startup ecosystem as well. There's just so many more young people going into the space, starting companies, a lot more venture capital dollars going into the big companies. And as we've seen, companies like Canva and Atlassian have just gone on from strength to strength. So really happy and excited to dive into some of those companies and some of the personalities in those companies.
Yeah, and today we're joined by Australian startup tech royalty. So as Adam mentioned, some of these companies are amazing and they've had astronomical growth over the last couple of years, which is stuff we're going to dive into today. But today on the panel, we're joined by Lachlan, who's the head of corporate comms at Canva, Theodora Burgess, head of community at Australia Reddit, and Jessica Norris, design enablement at Atlassian. So a really jam-packed panel.
Yeah, so hearing all these jobs, first thing that comes to mind is that there's a lot of diverse roles that we've got here, and they all sound really fascinating. So just sort of given the job in context, what would you say each of your superpowers are? Maybe starting with you first, Lachlan.
Good question. I actually thought about this one a lot last night, reading through the questions before today and thinking, like, it's always a little bit cliche to say curiosity as a superpower, but I actually think being really genuinely curious about why things work, how things work, was like an integrally important part of my role at Canva. And I was lucky to join back when we had about 400 people working at Canva 3 years ago. We just crossed 3,500 people working at Canva now. So that's been like an insane trajectory to be on and to have experienced that growth from within. And I think being really curious about things like, where's our revenue coming from? Where are our users? What do they care about? How does the business work? I'm not from a technical background, but I was really interested in like, how is the product actually being built? And I think being really curious about all of those things gave me a lot of the context to actually scale at the same time as the company. And when you're inside a company like that, that's growing and adding 1,500 people a year, it's like kind of being thrown around on a bit of a roller coaster. But the more context you have and the more curious you are about it, I feel like that made the chaos feel slightly more organized and helped me kind of grow at the same time as the company did as well.
Yeah, I think it would definitely align with curiosity as a superpower. What would you say, Jessica?
I'm pretty open about the fact that I have ADHD, and I recently did a talk about that being my superpower. But I think one of the parts of it is definitely that anyone who's ever been seen as slightly different tends to have a bit of empathy. And I think, especially in design, empathy is super important, being able to relate to people. And my role is basically supporting designers to do their best work. So I have to really understand what makes them tick. Learn more about them, what their wants and needs are. I'd say if I wasn't a design enablement coordinator or designer, I'd probably be a psychologist. So I think that's definitely my superpower is empathy.
What about you, Theodora?
Obviously, as someone from community, I'd have to say my superpower is forming connections between people. So finding everyone's own particular superpower and then bringing them together as a group to create something greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, as a magical superpower to have. And I think when I first heard about startups, I had all these weird connotations in my mind. Like I thought of Elon Musk building rockets. I thought of a fast-paced environment all the time. So coming into a startup role, what's something that kind of was surprising when you first started, and what's something that really like exceeded expectations?
I think there were probably a couple of things that were surprising. I was always super interested in startups before I joined Canva. And I actually emailed Melanie, our CEO, back in like 2016 when Canva was tiny, asking for a job. Didn't hear back, but we joke about it today. And so I knew a bit about like what it was like to work for a startup. But I think coming from a non-technical background, I do find it, and I still find it surprising, like how much thought goes into the product design and what's actually being built. And for me, without technical knowledge, adding a button to the website seemed quite rudimentary and seemed like this should take 5 minutes to add a button to the website. But working with designers and product managers and engineers is actually a lot that I'm really grateful to have learned that goes into how those decisions get made. And I guess something that surpassed my expectations is probably just the like sheer number of opportunities you can have in a startup. And I've been like really fortunate at Canva to have joined so early on and to have been able to like, build and grow a team of 14 comms people that are doing work now, and to travel to our different offices and launch new products and do all of these exciting things. And I think that was because they took a bet on me early on. And if I had joined a big corporation, that sort of experience probably would have taken 10 or 15 years. So I think that really surpassed what I was expecting when joining.
Yeah, that's something we can attest to. We have friends that have joined big corporates and it takes them 10, 15 years to be managing X number of people. We have friends who joined startups straight out of uni and now they're managing teams of 10 people. So it's incredible, the velocity of your journeys. What about you, Jessica?
I think I'd say the sheer size of Atlassian, like definitely wouldn't be considered like a startup in terms of size anymore. We've got just about 10,000 employees now, and it's not just an Australian-based completely company anymore. We've got offices all around the world. And that's something that definitely surprised me, because a lot of people in my team are based in the US, like half my immediate team are, and there's people in Europe, we've got people in India. It's kind of a global sort of company now. And what surpassed my expectations is probably the fact that even though it's still so big, it really does still stick to its values, its fundamental values. My favorite value is open company, no BS. I won't say the real word just in case, but there's also don't F the customer. That's another big value at Atlassian, and they do still stick to those values. And there is still that sense of just, I don't know, like Aussie larrikinism and community between everyone.
Yeah, community is a good segue onto you, Theodora.
Startups is a funny thing, because I think with all of us, Canva, Atlassian, we're probably a little bit past the initial baby startup phase where we're sort of more unicorns now. But with any startup, the great thing is the amount of autonomy, flexibility, creativity. You get to dip your finger into every single pie, and you will learn so much more than what you could have done in a normal 9-to-5 job. But for me, what was so surprising is that I'd been in the startup landscape before. I'd started my own business and it was all very small fry. But once you start getting into tech startup, that is a whole different world. Like, I was meeting colleagues from the US who used to work with the FBI. Another one used to be an astronaut, and another one used to advise Biden. And it's like when you get into this new stage of startup where they hire only the best. So you are considered one of the best, so you get hired, and then you suddenly have all of these networking connections to these people who are beyond anything you would have ever thought.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think working for the right startup at the right time can be one of the most dynamic experiences, and especially coming across all those personalities like you mentioned. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each one of your sort of companies and what you do at the company. So starting with you, Lachlan, as head of sort of external communications for Canva, obviously you're having to relay the story of Canva and their brand to the wider world. So the first thing that came to my mind was this idea of storytelling, about how you tell the story of Canva and their vision to the world. So could you sort of tell us, how is storytelling relevant to startups? What can you do to be a good storyteller?
Yeah, I think it's super relevant, and it probably changes a bit at the different stages of the company as well. Like, if you're a seed startup and you're brand new, your story is actually pretty pivotal to landing funding, particularly if you don't have revenue or product market fit yet. Your ability to position the problem and yourselves as the solution, ultimately, that's the story that you need to be able to sell to investors. And so I think becoming a storyteller as a founder, is actually one of the key parts of the job. And the bigger the company gets, the more you see founders as the external face of the company, telling the story to journalists and to investors and to candidates. It's extremely important for our talent brand in a market where everybody wants software engineers, and we're competing with lots of other really exciting companies and needing to tell stories that help us to stand out as well. But even internally now, we've started building out internal communications at a company our size, and being able to tell the story when there's 3,500 of us around the world has actually become really important to make sure that the company is all moving in the same direction. Everybody has context, everybody's aligned on the vision, particularly when we can't all just get on the ground floor in the Sydney office and chat amongst each other anymore. So I think, yeah, storytelling, depending on the stage you're at, super critical across all of the stages, but definitely for different reasons at each of them.
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. As like when we're talking to entrepreneurs or looking for people to invest, that's probably one of the biggest proxies for a startup success, because storytelling, it helps you attract capital, it helps you attract talent, it gets people onboarded with the vision. So another thing that Canva does really well is branding, in the sense they've got a really consistent and sort of intentional view of their brand. And I think in a lot of people in the startup world, it sort of occupies a lot of people's mindshare. Like when you hear about Canva, you know exactly what it is. When you see the advertising, you know what it's for. When branding is becoming so important for startups, but also for people trying to get jobs, what are some of the elements of really good brand building?
Definitely a lot, and like Canva's brand has been built for the last 10 years, and it's evolved over time as we've gotten bigger as well from the initial story. And I think that story has actually became the foundation of our brand, and is where I would start if we were doing it again, is to get the story right to begin with. And so an exercise that we do quite often is to think about, from like a media point of view or an external point of view, what is the dream article that we'd like the press to write about Canva one day? Like if we could write anything ourselves and publish it in the New York Times, what would they say about us? And then actually going and reverse engineering that story. So we as a comms team might say Canva has launched X, Y, and Z that we think would be really cool. We then are able to take that to the product team and help drive the vision by saying, here's the article we hope would land one day. And I think from a brand point of view, our tone of voice has been really important in that. We've always been a really sort of open, friendly company. We didn't want to be a faceless corporation. There was a lot of just like fun, colorful language that we use when we're talking to customers, when we're on social media. And then even just the little things, from like the colors that we use to our typography. Something I noticed just last night when I was scrolling through TikTok is that the navigation bar that we've built inside of Canva, having the gradient that we have, actually makes Canva super recognizable when you see it in videos. And I've started seeing people commenting like, oh my gosh, you're using Canva based on that. So there's a lot of little things that go into brand, but I think getting the story right and getting your values as well that build that story is definitely one of the first steps to building a brand that actually stands out. And I think, you know, even from a candidate point of view, people don't just want to work for any company these days. People want to work somewhere where they're contributing to something bigger than themselves, and it's a mission that they really care about, and you're doing something good for the world. And for us, that is a really critical part of our brand, and has also been a really critical part of our talent brand too.
There's some really good insights.
Yeah, and I had a few friends that attended the new product launch, and actually our fund attended, and apparently it was more like a festival than a product launch.
Someone tweeted like, this is the best music festival.
Probably better than Australian festivals. Theodora, we're going to move on to you now. And I think community is a buzzword we've all heard so many different times, especially over the last few years. And in the COVID time, I think a lot of young people interested in startups are starting to join communities. There's a big one in Australia called Early Work, where a lot of people are jumping on board and chatting to other people interested in the same thing. But I'd love to start off by kind of defining what is community.
It's such a big buzzword, isn't it? So look, if we're going by the dictionary definition, a community is a people with a shared group of interests or a shared narrative or a shared identity where they feel like they can bond over something that they're all equally passionate about. But it then becomes a lot more than that. I think that, you know, we start with building a product and then we move on to the storytelling, because product by itself is great, but it needs a story to sell it. And then I guess you could look at community as the next stage on that. If we look at marketing and comms and branding as the story that we tell to our audience, that we share with our audience, it's a way for brands to connect with the audience. Community is a way for the audience to connect with themselves. And that's, I think, where you start to see something really, really special.
Yeah, and that whole kind of community loop of audience connecting themselves is also what's supercharged Reddit's growth, right? So can you talk us through how Reddit thought about building community.
Okay, I'm going to let you in on a small secret. So when Reddit started, every account on Reddit was Steve, our CEO. We're about 100 people on Reddit, and all of them were different versions of Steve. But really, what has been important to us is, more than anything, to let people self-govern. We like to think of subreddits as individual cities, right? So like your own city, it has its own rules. It's got great people. It's got some dickheads. It's got every type of person in there, but you all have something in common. And I think that's what Reddit does really well, in that we don't break things down. And honestly, this is why advertisers don't understand us. We don't break things down by demographic or gender or age. We don't know how old anyone is or what gender they are, but you know what people are passionate about. And that is actually more impactful when, rather than saying, oh, I want to target a male aged 50, he's probably interested in this, but it's actually much more relevant to talk to people regarding their interests and what they're actually passionate about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when I hear the word community, I immediately think someone that's like really extroverted and connects people together. But do you think those same skills are needed in building online communities? And I'm thinking about our audience here where, as far as I know, there's no community subjects at uni yet, but they probably draw on disciplines from different areas. So kind of what are your thoughts on anyone that wants to get into your role and start building community? What kind of skills they need to have?
I'm a massive introvert. I don't like talking to people. And actually, 90% of the community team at Reddit are all introverts.
Wow.
And then actually, when you look at the moderators as well, a lot of them are introverts as well. I think the internet's created a fantastic space for us introverts to have that sense of connection, but allow us to turn off when we want to. But honestly, you don't need any special skills to run a community. I've got people who come from health backgrounds, military, advertising, medicine. It's all you need to do is have a passion to create a space where people can connect in a safe manner. You want to create a place where everyone can really find their tribe or find their people. And as long as you have, and I know this is going to sound super soppy, but really, as long as you have that drive and that passion to bring people together, that's all you really need. Everything else can be learned.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely like what we've seen in the past couple of years is that the idea of community is turbocharging a lot of startups' growth. Some are even starting with the idea of community, placing people with similar interests in a Slack and launching products off the back of it. So it's really, really impactful. So I'll go on to you now, Jessica, talking about design. So this is actually a topic I'm really interested in because I would label myself as not a very creative person. I would never be able to be a designer. The most creative thing I do is create PowerPoint slides, not good at drawing or anything of the like. So I'd love to hear from a designer, what is the things that make a great designer?
Yeah, well, I'd say, every day you're designing your podcast, really. You're working out what works, who your audience is, what they're going to like. And that's basically what design is. But I think one of the big things that makes a good designer, as I said before, is like empathy. And I think if you think about it, any great idea or great startup is successful because it does solve a user need. It solves an unmet need that's there. You think about a lot of Atlassian software, it's solving unmet needs of people to manage their work as well. Similarly, like Canva, it's there. The reason why they're so successful is because they understood what people want and they were able to give it to them. And that's what design is about too. Another thing is definitely having a growth mindset. So being able to question what you know and being able to constantly learn. For a second, I want to do an exercise, okay? So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to show me what you think you do when you open a sugar packet. Come on, close your eyes. Open up a sugar packet. Open a sugar packet. Okay. So I can see a lot of you are going like this the whole time. But if you actually watch anyone opening a sugar packet, they tend to get it and shake it a little bit first, just to loosen up the sugar that's in it. So these are the kinds of things that we might miss if we're not actually questioning our way of thinking and learning from what we see and digging deeper into that. So I think that's the most important thing you can do as a designer too, is like question the norms, question what you think you know, and be willing to change your mind on things.
That's really, really interesting. And I feel like the word design, similar to community, similar to storytelling, has sort of taken the startup world by its sort of grips. And it's become such an important thing with startups hiring lots of designers now, a lot more emphasis on beautiful products. Why do you think there's been a sort of shift in that sort of emphasis within the startup world?
I think that we've realized that it's not just about building something right, it's about building the right thing. And that's what design can help with. It's evidence-based approaches to creating something. So really digging into your audience and understanding, okay, so what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And instead of just coming up with the first idea that you've got, it's actually working out what the problem is that idea is going to solve anyway. And I think that's really what's definitely influenced Atlassian. Every single one of our customer-facing product teams have designers in them. And we're also leading design strategy. So not just actually designing and making things look pretty, but testing those things and coming up with what we should be creating next as well.
And do you have a favorite Atlassian product from a design perspective, and why would that be?
Well, from a design perspective, I'd say Trello. If anyone's ever used Trello, what's really interesting too is they've recently making some changes to the color scheme to make it more accessible. I really love the sort of use of the tags and everything, and being able to have that flexibility of visually being able to see the status of things. But personally, from a use perspective, I love Confluence. I live and breathe Confluence every day. If you have ever used Confluence in a job, wait till you see it at Atlassian. Something that's sort of unique about Atlassian is that we use our own products every single day. Our products are for teams to use, and so our own teams use them. And yeah, I love Confluence. It's just simple to use, really straightforward. You're not having lots of stuff thrown at you. It's all about the right tool for the right job.
That's definitely an indicator of a great product when the company's always using it themselves. And I think Trello for me adds a lot of value. I use it every day for work. It's really great product.
Yeah, and everyone attending here will have a chance to ask our guests some questions after. But what we thought we'd do is do a little bit of a quick fire round where we ask you some questions, maybe questions that university students may have on their mind or things that we're curious about. And you can give quick kind of few sentence answers. Does that sound good?
Terrifying.
So I think the first question is what would you tell your university age self about career with what you know now?
I think I would say it's certainly not linear, and that you could take it in so many different directions. And I know lots of people even at Canva that started as product designers and then went on to be product managers and then went on to do marketing or completely different things. And I think that's one of the interesting things about a startup is you get a chance to try all of those different things. And I probably would have told myself to ask more questions early on as well. I don't think there's ever such a thing as a stupid question. Nobody is going to think you're dumb for asking questions. In fact, the opposite is true. If you don't ask questions, it's often a worse reflection than if you do ask questions.
I think I'd probably tell myself that good career progression in general is just about seeing an opportunity and having the courage to go for it, really. Apply for that job that you're severely underqualified for. If you want to work at a particular company, just keep applying for it. And also be expanding your networks too, because sometimes what can get your foot through that door is who you know as well. So go to meetups, go to events like this and try to meet people in the industry and learn from them, because that's what's going to put you forward in your career.
Well, gosh, mine. It's okay if you have absolutely no idea what you want to do. I started out in journalism. I moved into SEO, ended up in community on a whim. My husband, for example, started off as an electrical engineer and now he's a graphic designer. So honestly, if you haven't figured out what you want to do, don't worry about it. If you're 25, 30 and you still aren't really sure what you want to do, don't worry about it again. There's always movement. There are ways you can shift and change. And, it might actually be unrealistic to expect to stay in the same profession for the entirety of your life. So don't put any pressure on yourself and take your time.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that's something we echo from, we've done almost 100 podcasts now, and everyone just says, even 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds that you on paper, billionaires have everything figured out. They still don't know what they're
Yeah,
doing.
we literally meet like 50-year-old founders that like didn't find out what they truly wanted to do and their passion until they started their company. And they sort of thought they knew what their passion was, but they didn't.
Yeah, and often they want to go back to their university age selves when they had no idea what was going on. So I wish I kind of knew that at university. But just building on what you said before, I think something unique about startups is what you look for a candidate is probably different to your normal kind of traditional corporate role. It's not as much resume based as like a lot of these jobs are moving more to portfolio based resumes and kind of things you do outside of work. So can you just talk to quickly, if you were in university right now and you wanted to get into a startup, apart from attending events and stuff, what kind of things would you be looking at?
For me, it's less about portfolios for communications, but I think the soft skills in startups are actually so important to try and build before you get there if you can. And it's things like curiosity I spoke about earlier will take you a really long way. I think also just like remaining calm when things change and being adaptable to change, because in a startup, things break literally every single day. And if it frazzles you every time that happens, a startup might not be the right place. But if you can kind of roll with the punches in a startup, that's also another really good way. And I think the other thing I really look for in hiring is just people that are passionate about what we're doing. I think passion and work ethic will take you so far if you really care about what you're doing. If you want to go to a startup and you're invested in their mission and you're curious, those people, I've hired a bunch of them that have done incredibly well based on passion and work ethic, not necessarily even with the qualifications for some of the jobs, which is why we've actually removed qualifications for most of the roles that we post now.
Yeah, I'd say like with designers, portfolios are a really good way for us to see what you can do as well. But in saying that, like with your portfolio, it doesn't have to be a project that you've done for a business or in an internship. It can be just a passion project. And like, as Lachlan said, it's really important to have passion, right? And so we like to look for designers that design isn't just a job for them, it's a hobby. Like they love being creative. There's a lot of great artists, videographers, people that love to do podcasts even in their own time. It's about, do they love being creative, and is that something that they want to take forward in their career too? So definitely don't be afraid to just make up your own project brief and create a project and put it in there. Again, it doesn't have to be a like real project, for lack of a better word. So I think portfolio is quite crucial in any sort of role where you're going to be on the tools and doing things. We want to see what you can do.
I feel like I'm just going to echo what both of you said, but it really is a case of we look for attitude, not accomplishments. So for us, it's about the type of person you are. Are you curious? Are you inquisitive? Are you inventive? Are you creative and work on different things? Because the idea is that we can teach you the skills. We can teach you how to use the tools, how to run reports, how to do analysis. What we can't teach is mindset. We can't teach you to be the sort of person who is humble and open and inquisitive about everything. And I think that personality type is really what stands out for us.
Yeah, no, those are really, really great insights. And I love the one that you said about side hustles, because what I've experienced in job interviews as well, that people aren't interested in what I studied that much or previous internships. When you're doing interesting things on the side, they want to talk about that. So it's a really, really great interview conversation. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for those great answers. I definitely learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. I think we're going to open the floor now to some Q&A from the audience. So yeah, if anyone has their hand up, if you want to ask a question.
Hi, my name is Nikki, and I'm a startup founder of a company called Seeing Culture, trying to create cultures where employees feel seen beyond just their job title. And we're really trying to shine a light on untapped potential to combat bias that happens in the workplace. I just wanted to understand, in what ways do you try and control for bias that exists within each of your workplaces? Sometimes we can be overlooked because we're young, inexperienced, all of the wrong reasons. How do you change that?
I love that question, and I love the sound of what you're working on as well. I think reducing bias in every kind of company is so important, and is something that we've tried to be very intentional about and have done a whole bunch of different things. But one of them is every single person who starts at Canva as part of onboarding goes through unconscious bias training. So we teach everybody what are some of the unconscious types of bias that do show up in the workplace, and how can you recognize those and combat them? And then the other thing that we did a couple of years ago now was add a note to all of our job descriptions at the very top, talking about, if you don't have all of the skills or qualifications that we've listed, please still apply, and we'd love to chat to you. And I think, making it really open and accessible and encouraging people from different backgrounds as part of that process has helped with diversity and reducing bias too.
Yeah, I think when we talk a lot, oh, sorry, do you have a follow-up question? I think when we talk about diversity a lot, like sometimes people tend to think of equality and like sort of, but I think that what's most important is the whole concept of equity with that. So like we do things like targeted recruitment. That's why people have diversity and inclusion targets as well, because we know that some people might not have the opportunities given to them to just be thrown into the mix with everyone else in applying, that we need to make sure that we create those opportunities for people to feel like they can come forward and apply for particular roles as well. And so I think that's probably one of the main things as well. But something that's very good, and I'm sure in your startup too, is inclusive design is something that we practice, which is very much about involving people with diverse backgrounds in the mix when we're designing products and services. And so like in a design team, diversity is even more important. It's very important everywhere, but it's super important because we want to make sure that our design team reflects the customers that we're designing for as well. I love that. Oh gosh, what was the question? Okay, what was the question?
Reducing
Sorry, I was going to say, the good thing I love about Reddit is that we have these things called ERGs, which are employee resource groups. So we actually have different groups for Latinx employees, Asians, LGBT, trans employees, and all of that. And as a young Asian woman working in tech, I hear you, and I fully believe and support and love everything that you're doing. And I think it's when you start to form those collectives of like-minded people who can really enact change together, that's when you can start pushing for things like quotas, which ensure equity, because we need to do those sorts of things, and making sure that the more prominent women or people of color in your company are being highlighted. But I love that you keep doing it.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. That was fantastic. One of the things that I really admire about all three companies here is that despite being, huge businesses, you've managed to retain the image and some of the really positive qualities of being a small business. I mean, you're at a startup kind of festival, despite being massive companies. I was wondering if you could kind of give maybe some insight into how you are able to be big businesses, but retain the agility, the autonomy, and the speed that is often associated with smaller companies.
You want to start?
Yeah, I think for us, and honestly, like knowing what Mike and Mel are like, for us, it comes from the top down. I think leadership needs to be deliberate about wanting to remain nimble and fresh. And it's all well and good if your company has these beliefs of being curious, don't be a dickhead, don't, do all of these things. But if it doesn't come from the top and filter all the way down, it's really easy for it to get lost on the way. And so for us, it is a very deliberate choice by our CEO to do things like give everyone a wellness day every quarter, because we see a lot of horrifying stuff online, or host kitchen parties for everyone, or host monthly yoga sessions. So it's very much a conscious decision to create a specific type of culture. It's definitely not something that happens by accident. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I think like as companies grow and scale, it's not going to be 100% possible for them to keep that culture exactly the same as it was before, because it's not the same company, and that's what makes a company great too. But I think keeping some of the strong like foundations, as I mentioned, the values are a big part too, but even just like the rituals and what that company was known for and why people joined that company. Like at Atlassian, we have a quarterly, well, it's twice a year, Ship It, which is our hackathon. So that's something that has been going from the very beginning, basically, And it's something that we still do today and has moved to being completely remote and virtual if we want to as well. So it's about like keeping those foundations, but also adapting them to the context that you're in as well.
Yeah, I definitely echo all of that. I think we're a private company, so that certainly helps with our speed and agility and our ability to kind of make decisions quickly. The other thing, it certainly does come from the top, and Melanie talks all the time about Canva only being 1% of the way there, and it's something that's actually almost become a bit of a running joke. We just hit 100 million users, and everybody's now like, surely we're a bit more than 1% of the way there. But like Mel's view and the company's view on this is that you're a startup until you stop dreaming, and I think we're always 1% of the way there, because as soon as we get close to 1.1%, we dream about something even bigger, and it's time to take on a new challenge. And so that's been part of it. And then the culture, I think just keeping it fun and keeping it real has been important. We have a whole team of, I think, must be close to 80 people now that we call the Vibe team, who are like quite literally responsible for the vibe of the company and look after like everything from fun events to lunch to the way we celebrate goals. And I think just making sure we scale that really intentionally has been important. And one of the parts of that, as a startup grows, it's really important to hire very experienced senior people from outside of the company to bring their talent in. And we've been really intentional about sort of pairing those people with homegrown people from Canva who have a lot of the context on our culture and the way that we've done things so far. And we found that pairing of context with like very senior real world experience has allowed us to just accelerate even faster.
I've actually got another quick one. So I think something really important for this whole topic today is this idea of networks and sort of communities as well. And I think in our life, whether it's like investing, getting jobs, like knowing the right people has like really, really helped. So have there been like, from quite a practical perspective, have there been any sort of communities that you've joined, like meet other startup people? Have there been any sort of like even online ones that have helped you?
Ooh. Any women here join like-minded bitches drinking wine? Amazing. It was actually started by Jane Liu of Shopo. It's a group of all female entrepreneurs. So that's a fantastic resource that I'd recommend.
One that I was part of is Girl Geek, and that's really great for women in technology as well. There's also, if you go on to meetup.com, there's so many different meetups. There's a big design thinking meetup. But another really good way to actually meet people is to go to conferences. And although conferences are very, very, very expensive, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them do offer scholarships. So if you're interested in attending a particular conference, definitely look into it and see if they do offer scholarships.
It's also student discounts, like
Yeah.
Sunrise, a big Blackbird one. I think you can get $30 tickets
that's
for
great.
students, and they're 300 or something normally. So
that's a really good way to also like meet people in the right industry that you want to get into as well.
Yeah, the VC firms have a lot of stuff going on, and Sunrise is one of those. And so those meetups are always really good. I even think just like the Australian startup Twitter community has come a long way over the last couple of years. And everybody's pretty friendly on Twitter as well. And it's like, could just be a matter of reaching out to people and asking if they want to grab coffee or chat about your startup. The more people that you know that are doing this kind of work, I think these networks are so important when times do get challenging, or you have questions or you need advice from other people, and that shared lived experience really can't be undervalued in companies that are growing as fast as some of these are.
Yeah, those 2 points are great. Definitely, if you're interested in the space, go on LinkedIn and follow all the big VCs, because they have events and some of them are really nice, free drinks, free food. And then also getting a Twitter account, that's one of the best ways to connect, because people are just, if you're on Twitter, you're probably quite curious, you're going to be interested in tech, and people always like post random meetups and stuff. So it's really easy way.
something an early mentor told me that, tech and startups is as much about being in the arena as anything else. So if you show up with the right attitude and you're constantly getting in the arena, whether that's listening to the right podcast, going to the right events, talking to the right people, everyone's pretty friendly as well. Like, I think if someone declines a coffee with you or anything like that, it's just because they don't have time. It's never about them not wanting to do it. And I think that's kind of a good segue into another question I had, is we've talked so much about the benefits of startups and how amazing they are. Can you talk us through a bit of the work-life balance about a startup? Because I think when I was a university student, I had this idea in my head that, there's a ping pong table where you play ping pong all day, drink some free coffee, and then
a beer tap or kombucha tap as well.
Yeah, and you obviously have those benefits, but I also have friends at startups who work incredibly hard.
Yeah, we've got all of those things, and that certainly adds to the fun element as well. But I think there's something that I learned pretty early is you have to be very intentional about work-life balance in a startup because there's just always more work to do. And it's like the same as a lot of companies, there's just constant goals. And if you wanted to fill 24 hours of your day with work, it would be possible and there'd still be more that you could do. And so my team, we talk a lot about like there are things that can be done tomorrow at the end of the day. And I think trying to even set 3 non-negotiables of things that you will do and just communicate them so that they're known. It could be like I go to the gym at 6 o'clock, for example, that could be one that you have, or I don't log on till 9, or, you know, for parents that are in startups, they might say I'm going to go to my kids' sports games, but not to practices. And I think having those non-negotiables and communicating them means that, you know, when you do need to decide between, do I need to do this or do I need to make sure that I'm setting those boundaries, it's a little bit easier to draw the lines there as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of startups and just new industries and the world in general now is putting more of an emphasis on quality over quantity when it comes to work, right? And if you can't focus or you're struggling, that means the quality of the work's going to completely diminish. Like in every role that I've had in design, I've had a lot of autonomy. So I don't necessarily have someone telling me exactly what I'm going to be doing each day and when to do it. And so because of that, that sounds great, but it means you've also got to be your own boss in a way, and you've got to try to sort of give yourself set times to do things and kind of push yourself to make sure that you're working when you want and how you want, and you're achieving what you want to as well, because no one's going to come to you and say, oh, you need to do this at this particular time. Like, you've got to do it yourself. And the most successful graduates and the most successful people I've seen are the ones that have that drive to do quality work, not just quantity of work. And it doesn't have to be quantity, but yeah, they're really kind of on themselves to sort of push themselves and do what they can.
I am a horrible workaholic. I used to work like just 12, 13-hour days, and it was awful. And one thing I learned is I actually hate the term work-life balance. I think it sets up a very unrealistic expectation in your head that you're juggling all of these plates at once. Everything has equal effort put into it, your home, your work, your social life. And it's actually not about balance, it's about harmony. So there will be times when your home takes priority and work needs to take less of a priority. There'll be other times when you need to focus more on work. So rather than keeping everything balanced at the same time, it's the idea that everything ebbs and flows in harmony. There will be some times where some areas take a bit more attention and then it'll flow back again. And for me personally, that helped in setting firmer boundaries about what I should be doing and what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and that also ties into energy management as well. And I think Lachlan touched on that, right? Like, if you need to go to the gym to set yourself up for the day, that's actually as much of a work thing as it is a life thing, because it sets you up to concentrate better and stuff. And I think slowly cultures are evolving to reflect that, which is really awesome. Was there any other audience questions? Feel free to jump up your hand.
There's some great minds up here.
there's one.
I think you should definitely take the opportunity to ask a question.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask about like, you know, ever since the pandemic, of course, like a lot of things have changed. So, and because, you know, your companies are very collaborative with different people. So how do you guys like balance out like collaborations with your teams? Like, especially since right now, like not everyone is required to go to work or, you know, go on site and go to the office and all that. Yeah.
Definitely took a while for us to get into the swing of, you know, figuring out like what did it look like during lockdown when there was absolutely no option to go to the office to what does it look like now that we're hybrid. And for Canva, you only need to be in the office 8 times a year or twice a quarter. And so we have a lot of people that are in person by choice, a lot of people that are remote. And there's been lots of decisions and we're still learning so much about what this future is going to look like. I don't think any company has got it 100% right yet. But it's like even little things, if you've got one person that's at home and the rest of the team is in the office trying to join from separate meeting rooms or booths so that you're not one person on Zoom with a whole room of people in person. I think those are like little things that actually do create bias and trying to be really just conscious of, you know, making sure that doesn't happen has been important. And then I think just over communicating as well, now that we're remote and have teams around the world, being able to sort of pass the baton when you log off for the end of the day to someone on the other side of the world took time for us to get into that habit. But there was a lot of just like learning how to share context and document processes and send Slack updates at the end of the day. So lots of little things I think contribute to the much bigger picture for us there.
Yeah, so at Atlassian, we introduced a policy called Team Anywhere, which means you never have to come into an office. So you can work from anywhere in the world as long as you have your computer and can get online, really. And I think that sort of takes a bit of a like remote first approach to things. So a lot of the things that we do, even a lot of our events, there's always going to be a remote option to do things. But it's again like the whole social connection aspect we all know can be very difficult remotely. So we've had to actually adapt and get people in who know how to best run remote events even. And we're constantly like writing articles, you can see even on our blogs as well about what techniques and tips we're using to work remotely. But again, like the whole different time zone things, it's still a struggle because there's just not enough hours in the day of crossover with people. Like we've got people in the US. So because of that, it means that I've made, and I know a lot of my team, we have quite flexible working schedules. So I know someone that starts at around 7 in the morning so that they can sort of cross over with the US, and then they're done by 2 basically, and they might come on in the evening sometimes if there's a big meeting that they need to attend. So it's all about sort of working a schedule and making sure that you definitely don't overwork yourself, but if you do want to get up earlier or go to bed later, whatever you want, you can.
I was going to say, it's the same for us as well. And I think all of us realize the pains of working in an international company, especially when you're trying to figure out 3 different time zones, the US, Europe, and Australia. I don't know about you guys, for me, Australia is usually the one that gets like shunted to the side. So it's tough, but I think the benefit is that we're all basically digital natives. So we're very comfortable online and connecting with people online, but it's also deliberately setting up the time to connect with your peers. So I have fortnightly catch-ups with everyone from a different team, and we're not even talking about work. It's just a social catch-up to find out what they're up to. So a lot of it as well is putting in that deliberate effort.
Any other questions? Well, we might open it up so you can come chat to the panelists if you don't want to kind of screen out that question in front of everyone. But thank you so much for joining us today. That was awesome. I think I learned a lot and really inspired by everything you guys are building.
Yeah, no, that was great. Really, really interesting answers. Great Q&A. And we've also got a flyer going around, I think, which if you can all get that flyer, give that a scan and just sort of rate the event, that would be great, because I think in a week they're going to sort of judge how the different events went.
Do we get a prize if we're the best?
I think there are some prizes. Awesome. So please do feedback. That'd be great. But yeah, that was awesome. Thank you
If we
so
have some
much.
time for everyone to come. Cool. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, yeah.